In 2023, I played around 60 games, the most games I've played in a year to date. This selection includes backlogged games and new games, which I wrote my thoughts and ratings on as I went through them, and replay throughs, which I did not rate. Let's talk about them. At least it isn't Forces. Okay, fine, I'll sum up my thoughts on Frontiers. I got it on launch night, played for half an hour, refunded it. Winter sale came along, gave the game another shot with a few mods to try and make the game not control like total sludge, but this did not save Frontiers from being one of the most aimless, soulless experiences I have ever played. Run around the generic open world landscape and watch as all the game assets pop in only when they're a few feet away from you, haphazardly plopped all throughout the sky with zero shits given for immersion or fitting within the game's environment. Marvelous. I feel like I'm going insane. I just cannot see what everyone else sees in this pile of nothing. Besides the boss fights, which, granted, are all spectacle and no substance, this game is so bland and boring. It lacks its own flair or identity, further emphasized by the terrible cyberspace levels and their reused assets and level designs from games in the series I'd much rather be playing instead. Good God, I'm tired of seeing Green Hill, Chemical Planet, Sky Sanctuary. Enough. The parts of Frontiers I enjoyed the most? Running around mindlessly and fishing. I'm serious. It was actually quite relaxing. Frontiers is aggressively mediocre in nearly every way. Not even mods could save it for me. Lunasis is like a sandwich. It costs about the same as one, it's pretty easy to digest, and you could finish it in an afternoon, though that must be a pretty big sandwich if it takes you an afternoon to finish. It has a pretty nice art style, cool level themes, the food one being my favorite, and some pretty nice tunes. Good controls also, but turning is a bit stiff sometimes. I completed Hana's campaign, but didn't touch any of the other characters. I enjoyed Lunasis. It's a very comfy little platformer. Support the developer if you can, they deserve it. It's like what, $5 or something? Come on. Also looking forward to Excel Coda. I really enjoyed Sonic after the sequel back in the day, so when I saw that Lake Fepard, the creator of before and after the sequel, was making a new original game, I was intrigued. Spark 1 is an okay cross between Sonic and Kirby that's heavily bogged down by overly long levels, sometimes 10 plus minutes in length, and cheap bosses in the latter half. The combat's fine for what it is, although easily cheesed with the right power-ups. The best thing going for Spark 1 is definitely the soundtrack. It's up there as one of my favorite soundtracks in any video game. It's absolutely goated. Please give it a listen. Spark 2 is a step down from the first game in nearly every way. The controls are pretty sloppy, and the combat boils down to mindless button mashing. The story, while tonally all over the goddamn place, and frankly unimportant to the first game overall, is far dumber here. Hey, at least there's no forced edgy swearing like in the demo. Yeesh. The one advantage I say this game has over the first is that no level overstays its welcome. But even this comes with a slight downside depending on how you look at it. My total runtime of Spark 2 was under 2 hours. It is definitely the Spark game of all time. Spark 3 scratched that high-speed 3D platformer itch that new Sonic games will likely never scratch for me again, as sad as that is to say. It controls like butter. Spark 3 feels like the culmination of everything Lake Fepard learned about game design up to that point, from before the sequel to now. There's tons of fulfilling side objectives and collectibles. Combat is also much improved, though still not perfect. This game even makes playing Spark 2 basically obsolete, as every level from that game was added to this game as free post-game content. How sick is that? The story, without spoiling, is mostly fine until the final act, which just goes completely off the fucking rails, and not in a good way. It's nowhere near detrimental enough to bring this game down much for me though. Spark 3 is a fantastic game, the best in the series by far. 2009. That's when I first played Red Rescue Team. Sinister Woods boss was as far as I got. I tried the game again and again every few years, starting with a new save each time, to no avail. Mystery Dungeon can never hold my interest for more than a few hours. Even when trying Rescue Team DX back in early 2022, only a few hours. Back on the shelf it went. After all these years, I get it now. It finally clicked after nearly 15 years. Every aspect of this game is so lovingly crafted, from gameplay improvements to the pleasant new art style to the rearranged OST staying extremely faithful to the original compositions. Rescue Team DX is one of the best remakes I've ever played. No hyperbole. While not deep by any means, its story is solid, especially the Runaway Fugitives chapter. Absolutely the highlight of the game for me. This game also has a seemingly endless amount of post-game content, which could keep me coming back to this particular entry for many years to come. Such a feel-good, good time all around. Now, what I would have never expected, despite hearing non-stop praise for it for the better part of a decade, was for a Pokemon game to make me cry. Wait, why is the music changing already? God damn it, here come the waterworks. A massive improvement over Rescue Team in nearly every way. Explorers of Sky features the best story, world, and characters a Pokemon game has ever had, and likely will ever have. My protagonist for this one was Riolu, and my partner was Munchlax. I adored their dynamic, especially having made Mob Psycho my naming theme for this game. Please watch Mob Psycho 100, it's really good. Without spoiling anything specific, the extra story episodes added to Sky are wonderful additions, especially the last one. My god, it's amazing. One of the highlights of the whole game in my opinion. Explorers of Sky is truly special. What I'm most glad about after playing this game is that I got to appreciate it in full as an adult first. After having watched a video by, and I wrote this in my script, insert guy here, it's 3 AM and I couldn't remember if a gun was pointed at my head, also known as Blaze Hedgehog, on the definitive ways to play most Sonic games, I wanted to play SA2 again. I went in with the goal of doing something I'd never done since I was a kid. Get all the emblems. This took much longer than I would like to admit, pretty much the entire month of February actually. I did it. I got all the A-ranks and all the emblems. Fuck yeah, dude. Kid me would be so proud. And that's worth celebrating. I first tried Freedom Planet in 2017, shortly after it was ported to Switch. I got about halfway through Lila's campaign and put it down. I could not tell you why, I honestly have no idea. I remembered next to nothing about the game diving back into it, but it proved to be decent. Freedom Planet shares numerous similarities with Spark 1 for me, despite releasing 3 years prior. The most notable similarities to me were the, say it with me now, latter half containing overly long levels and cheap bosses. Looking at you, Battle Glacier 1. Final boss was also utterly brutal, unlike anything I've experienced in a 2D platformer before or since. Definitely a final boss I won't soon forget. I only finished Lila's campaign, but I did give Carol and Mila a try. They're fine, I guess. Similar to SA2, I had never completed this one. Never got all the emeralds. I finally did it, depth perception be damned, and was greeted after X Zone with the regular ending. I was unaware that I also had to beat the game with Tails, Knuckles, and Amy afterwards to get the true ending. Nah, I'm okay. Game's still pretty good though. This game irritates me to no end. When people who've never touched a Sonic game call them hold right simulators, this is literally the game they're describing. It's real! Sonic Advance 2 is 2 grueling hours of holding right, being thrust into death traps, and not much else. This game features some of the most infuriating, abysmal bosses in a Sonic game. Though I must be the crazy one because Dimps was so proud of these bosses that they put a boss rush in a Sonic game. Don't even get me started on getting the true ending. I didn't even bother for my sanity's sake. Easily one of the worst 2D Sonic games. My only prior experience with Advance 3 was around a decade ago. I played the first few acts of Route 99 and put the game down. Retrying it all these years later, I wanted to go for the true ending, with 100% actually being possible for a sane human being this time around. Doing so turned Advance 3 into a pseudo-Metroidvania that I actually somewhat enjoyed, albeit with some pretty messy level design. The partner system is easily the main selling point of this entry, as has been echoed by everyone who's played it. I constantly switched character combinations throughout my playthrough, and it made the game a heck of a lot more fun. My favorites were Tails and Sonic for speed, Knuckles and Tails for exploration, and Knuckles and Amy for bosses. And the upward wall dash. I just think it's neat. Speaking of bosses, nothing in a Sonic game has ever induced as much frustration from deep in my core as this game's boss lineup post Sunset Hill. It's somehow worse than Advance 2's. That's just impressive. Advance 3 is kind of a mess, but a mostly alright mess with some cool concepts that make it stand out. Donut County is a chill acoustic and electronic album with a neat little game attached. Had some fun writing that got a few chuckles out of me, mostly with the Trashopedia entries. If I had sticky feet, I'd walk on the ceiling and scream. This game is a short, sweet, cozy palate cleanser. Can you believe the guy who made this will go on to direct Neon fucking White? Crazy shit, man. In the attempts I've made to do so over the years with Link Between Worlds and Link's Awakening DX, I've never really been able to get into 2D Zelda. Until now. Minish Cap is the first 2D Zelda I've completed, let alone beaten. The world looks small at a glance, but it's actually the perfect size. Solid locations, dungeons, and side quests. I even got the Tingle Trophy for matching every kinstone. Oh, and Valdi's a pretty cool villain. He's just a little guy. The only things I can really dock points on are traversal occasionally being a hassle and the kinstone system. I think it could have been implemented better. A solid Zelda game overall. Now for an NES Mega Man Lightning Round. Would have been a massive headache without Legacy Collection's Rewind feature. Very simple, kind of unfair at times, old game moment. I never assumed the first game would actually have a solid wipe weapon lineup, but it surprised me. Rolling Cutter and Elect Beam are a lot of fun. A fine first entry, but it shows its age far more than pretty much every other entry. I've beaten Mega Man 2 more times than I can count, so I'm always happy to revisit it. This is actually the first time I've played it on difficult, and I'll be honest, I barely noticed most of the time. The only real difference compared to my prior playthroughs was Metal Man being way more difficult as the first Robot Master. Mega Man 2 is still one of my favorite entries. Weaker level design across the board than previous entries, especially 2, and just feels rushed. I'm not at all a fan of the blatant padding of the Doc Robot stages. The weapon selection sucks ass. I didn't enjoy this one anywhere near as much as 2, which is really disappointing. However, I'd say I enjoyed it around the same as 1 overall, despite its low points. It is a sequel to 2 after all. Mega Man 4 was by far the most surprising of the bunch for me. The moment you boot it up, it hits you with the most noticeable leap in presentation and polish between entries across the entire NES series in the form of a beautifully animated intro cutscene. I was also surprised by how fun and balanced this one is. Most of the stages, weapons, and bosses are winners, Toadman notwithstanding. I really enjoyed this one. one of the easiest classic Mega Man games, noticeably shorter stages than those of previous entries. I also found the near total lack of mini-bosses to be really odd. It makes most stages feel underwhelming and sorta empty. I don't have much else to say other than that about Mega Man 5. It's fun, but mostly forgettable. I feel nearly the exact same about 6 as I do about 5. Short stages, super easy bosses. If I have to choose between 5 or 6 to play over the other, I'd choose 6. I found it to be more memorable and fun than 5 overall. The Rush armors are a great addition that ultimately break the tie for me. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. I first played Mega Man 11 right after it came out. I had just played 7 through 10 a few months prior and really liked all of them, so I was optimistic. I put it down within an hour. Nearly 5 years later, I thought I'd give it a second chance. I can't do it. I still fucking hate this game. It looks bad, it controls bad, hell even the music blows. For a Mega Man game, that's a death sentence. For an 8-year gap between 10 and 11, Christ, what a disappointment. Sonic fucking dies! Game of the Year 2023! In all seriousness, Murder is a fun and cozy 90-minute long distraction. Please don't take that out of context. Lovely art style and pretty good music. It's definitely evident that this was made by passionate longtime fans. The only real criticism I have is that there were a few too many of those 2D isometric minigames for my liking. A little treat of a game. Hi-Fi Rush is a bombshell of a shadow drop that has dazzling style in both its art and animation. It oozes GameCube, PS2, Xbox era charm from every pore. Gross. This would be the part where I go on about more specifics of the game, but I shelved it after the first boss. I'm sorry. The controls, combat, and worst of all the music left a lot to be desired in my opinion. I'll likely give it another shot someday, but its first impression did not grip me unfortunately. So, I have a bit of a history with Ultra Sun and Moon. They're not the worst Pokemon games, but they're definitely my least favorite. I wanted to see if putting a spin on a replay would make me appreciate them more. I originally tried this with a Mono Dark run sometime last year, but I abandoned it very quickly. I decided on Ghost instead, because Ultra has one of the best Ghost rosters in the series. After many hurdles, including not being able to get Litwick on Citra and needing a Rowlet with just the right attack stat to win the teacher fight in the school for a total of 8 fucking restarts of the tedious beyond belief slog that is the opening hours of Gen 7, I finally had a run going. This would end up being the first monotype run I've ever finished. Did I accomplish my goal of liking the game more? Nope, not even a little. But my final team was pretty damn cool, even if they were named all after Overwatch characters. So that's one takeaway at least. This is it. This is my game of the year. And it's not even close. You can decide for yourself whether you count this as a game. My logic, it's paid, it has a new story, new mechanics, new map, and it's 40 hours long. If you ask me, that's quite a game if I do say so myself. A little bit of background, Xenoblade 3 is my favorite game of all time. Now that that's out of the way, Future Redeemed is everything I could have asked for out of both a Xenoblade 3 prologue and a finale to the saga. The only gripe I can even think of is the post-game requiring grinding to level 99 after ending the game at around level 75 or so. Wasn't a fan of that. The fact that Future Redeemed's announcement trailer was released on my birthday and released 1 week later, fuck man, it's everything to me. I adore Xenoblade 3, I adore Future Redeemed. Pokemon Infinite Fusion is a super ambitious fan game with a robust reimagining of Kanto that I did not expect going into it. The biggest draw for me was the sheer magnitude of unique fusion sprite art made for the game. From funny to cute to badass to any mix of these and so much more, there's something for every Pokemon fan here. There's so many ways one could play Infinite Fusion. For my playthrough, I paired up every type with another for 9 total type combinations, and then decided on 9 fusions for my team. Chartile, Ardos, Metalax, Crookwrath, my favorite. Oh my god, look at him! Aligon, Luxcrow, Nanardos, Coffatum, and Sylveon. With the exception of Bug Rock, I've never used any of these type combos before, along with most of the Pokemon that I've used. This ended up being a ton of fun. The only things I wasn't too big a fan of were the post-game and the implementation of Johto. Overall, a solid fan game. I adored Breath of the Wild when it came out. Rarely has a game ever engrossed me as much as Breath of the Wild did. It was truly magical. I can count on just one hand the number of games I've played where I can say, damn, I wish I could play that for the first time again. Tears of the Kingdom miraculously fulfilled that desire for me despite the map being the same on the surface, haha, and so much more. There's been tons of divisiveness regarding this game over the last few months, but damn it, I still really like this game despite its issues. And yes, it does have issues. This game is not perfect. I love just how much creative freedom this game allows the player. From weapons to vehicles and contraptions to puzzle and problem solving, I loved nearly every minute of Tears of the Kingdom, with a few exceptions. First, the dungeons, while better than Breath of the Wild by a considerable margin, isn't saying much. They still don't come close to the heights that previous entries reached. Also, each dungeon ending the same exact way, and also kind of unrelated but also related, the story retconning Breath of the Wild almost entirely is pretty fucking stupid. Second, for how much emphasis the Sky Islands got in marketing, it's even the entirety of the front cover, they're fairly underwhelming. Too many copy-pasted island layouts across the sky that still ended up being far too infrequent overall. And lastly, the depths also could have had more to them. They were also a bit undercooked and samey for my liking, with one exception that I won't spoil here. This game's really good, but you knew that already. I wouldn't mind this being the last of the formula in the slightest, though. I'd love a return to traditional 3D Zelda going forward. Since I was planning on playing Pikmin 3 and 4 anyways, I wanted to run through the whole main series. I've replayed 1 and 2 a lot over the years, but it's been a good number of years since I last did. Pikmin 1 still holds up fairly well, with a few quirks that made it a bit more frustrating than I remember, mainly Pikmin AI and tripping. What I admire about this game now more than ever are its simplicity and replayability. Jumping into this one immediately after the 180 plus hours I put into Tears of the Kingdom over the span of a month and a half was such a necessary breath of fresh air. It's exactly what I needed. I was very eager to replay this one for probably the 5th time? Yep, still peak. Pikmin 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and this playthrough didn't change that. The procedurally generated caves are so much fun, and I love when they're absolute dicks to the player. Not enough games do that, especially in ways that aren't detrimental to overall enjoyment, in my opinion. Pikmin 2 is a comfort game for me through and through. It's not perfect, and I can understand why one would call it their least favorite of the series, but no matter how many times I replay it, it always guarantees that I'll have a good time. I have an interesting history with Pikmin 3. I got it in 2016 with the Nintendo Selects re-release. I got to the final area and stopped. I stopped literally right before the end. I didn't remember anything specific regarding my playthrough afterwards, even though I definitely remember liking it. Because it was on the Wii U, it stayed shelved for all these years. I didn't even care enough to try it again after Deluxe was released on Switch. Until now. Pikmin 3 is better than I remember. It's the natural evolution of Pikmin 1's general structure, collecting fruit to save your planet instead of ship parts to save yourself. I also tried out the Olimar side story content added to Deluxe, and it's pretty darn neat. I still like 2 more overall, but I found new appreciation for 3. You have no idea how excited I was for this to finally come out. Pikmin 4 is a true sequel to Pikmin 2 I've been wanting since I was a kid. It takes all the best attributes of that game and does them again but better. One of the common criticisms against 2 that I can understand is that the above ground maps were slightly underwhelming compared to the caves. That's been completely rectified here. Every area is fully fleshed out to the same degree as those in 3 with the caves of 2. This game is chock full of surprises. One in particular was a highlight of the year for me. If you know, you know. Dandoria is a great addition to spice up the formula. Bringing the chaotic strategic fun of previous mission and battle modes to single player is a brilliant idea. There's something for every Pikmin fan in this game. It has all the best attributes of the series rolled up into one nearly perfect product. Constantly having to fight the untoggleable auto lock-on, the night expeditions being slightly underwhelming, and Oatchi making basically any form of challenge trivial are the main factors that bring this game down just under 2 as my favorite. Pikmin 4 was well worth the wait. Now to backtrack a little. I played this game between Pikmin 3 and 4, but covered 4 before this game for cohesion's sake. I've been wanting to get around to Return to Dreamland for many years, being a fan of Triple Deluxe and especially Planet Robobot. Deluxe is a solid remaster that looks and sounds wonderful. Every level has been beautifully updated. I had a pretty good time with this game, although these levels didn't have much staying power for my brain wrinkles. The fact that they updated every fucking track from the original is crazy to me. HAL almost never misses when it comes to displaying their undying passion for this silly little pink guy. This is even more evident from the newly added Merry Magaland. I played all the minigames. Many times. Not just for the sake of completion, but because the majority of them are genuinely really fun. The also newly added Magolor Epilogue is neat in concept with the roguelite inspired starting with nothing and building up your funky little guy, getting your powers and skills back as you progress, and I appreciate its inclusion, but I found its execution to be undercooked. Levels are far too short and easy to allow for full advantage of your newly acquired arsenal. Return is pretty good, but I still like the 3DS sequels more. Out of every generation, the one I've used the least amount of Pokemon from is Gen 8, by a long shot. I didn't want to just play vanilla Sword and Shield again, being mind-numbingly easy and all. I searched to see if someone's made a difficulty hack for Sword and Shield yet. I found one called Divine Sword and Blessed Shield and decided to give it a shot. When I attempted the first gym with my humble team of 3, I wiped 3 times. The gym was impossible with my current team. I switched gears and turned the playthrough into a mono psychic run so I could get a larger team. I picked up a few psychic types in the wild area and started grinding. And grinding. And grinding. Look at Milo's team. This is the first fucking gym. I stopped. I gave it an honest shot, but this hack is not fun. The first gym being this overtuned, and later gyms going even further into that type of design evaporated any desire I had in continuing. Maybe Triano will make a Sword and Shield hack eventually. I won't hold my breath though. I actually first tried playing this hack last year, but didn't get far. I tried playing it with Nuzlocke catching rules, but quickly fell off, as I had just come off of many Pokemon games in a row. Heart Gold, Blaze Black 2 Redux, Colosseum, and XD. I was very burnt out on Pokemon to say the least, and this was the final nail in the coffin for me until Scarlet and Violet released. I tried it again after Blessed Shield left me disappointed and went in with a team plan in mind. This playthrough will go on to have one of my favorite teams I've used to date. Farfetch'd with fighting flying typing, Dedene's Pixelate Tri-Attack, and Gourgai's Flare Boost made them all so much fun to use. They all had such good synergy with each other. As for the game itself, I enjoyed this game a lot more than I thought I would. It is still X and Y, so it's nothing too special generally speaking, but the changes made to most boss fights are spectacular. They actually put up somewhat of a fight. The highlight of this hack for me was the Elite Four. By far my favorite Elite Four in any Pokemon game I've ever played. Each member is a different battle type. Malva's a double battle, Cybolt's a triple battle, Wikstrom's a rotation battle, and Drosna's a single battle. This is fucking genius. Seibold and Malva took me several attempts and actually made me strategize what order of Pokemon and what moves I should use. It was so good. This playthrough emphasized why I like to give some games a second chance. Sometimes all it takes is a different approach or mindset to uncover something truly special. I'd been wanting to try Metroid Prime for a good while after having a blast playing most of the 2D Metroids for the first time 2 years prior, and Remastered was the perfect opportunity to finally do so. It's bonkers to me how Retro Studios nailed transitioning Metroid to 3D on their first try. Prime has stellar world and level design, great bosses, Omega Pirate notwithstanding, and a fucking sick soundtrack. My god, are you listening to the song playing right now? Shit's gorgeous. One of the only qualms I have is that I wish some sort of fast travel between save rooms was added in this remaster, but to play devil's advocate with myself, having to traverse the world dozens of times over made me learn the fuck out of the map. So in that way, it's good that this game doesn't have fast travel. I remember this map like the back of my hand. Prime now stands with Super and Dread as arguably my favorite Metroid game. It depends on the day. Now if Primes 2 and 3 could get the remaster treatment, that'd be super cool, thanks. What a stark contrast to Metroid Prime, right? Donkey Kong Country's been praised left, right, and center for almost 30 years. Goddamn. So I'll try to keep it brief. It still holds up pretty darn well today. Mostly. Going for full completion without a guide is nigh impossible. Looking at you, Orangutan Gang, an oil drum fucking alley with its one banana for a bonus inside a bonus when nothing in the game tells you about that cryptic bullshit, fuck you! The soundtrack is, as you all know, really fucking good, and the game also still looks pretty good today. DKC's a bona fide classic. DKC 2 is much better than the first. I had a hard time putting the game down because of how much fun I was having for most of the ride. The soundtrack is absolutely iconic, better than the first games in my opinion. Nearly every track knocks it out of the park. Just might be one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. I wasn't prepared for how much tighter and refined this game would be compared to the first. It's that kind of thing you can only truly understand if you played both before, especially back to back. The first half had very reasonably hidden collectibles, not too obvious, but not Oil Drum Alley cryptic either. However, the latter half sort of fell back into that territory with some levels, unfortunately. Almost a slam dunk, but some levels are kinda stinky. I also found this game considerably more difficult than DKC 1, but never frustratingly difficult. It was a very fair kind of hard. Except Animal Antics. Fuck Animal Antics. Still a great time all around. Among the best games I played this year. DKC 3 is by far the easiest of the trilogy, which I'd argue works against this entry. I found most of the levels and the soundtrack, sadly, to be pretty forgettable. I also wasn't a big fan of the world map, with the exception of the point when the player is given the choice between tackling Cotton Top Cove and Mechanos. It's the only time in the game that it gives you that kind of choice. I would have liked to have seen more of that. Of the trilogy, 3 took the longest for me to fully complete, yet it was also the smoothest. It's just a shame that not much stands out in this entry compared to 1 or 2, in my opinion. Better than the first, not as good as the second. Jet Set Radio is if the word clunky was a video game. I have a lot of respect for this game's personality, art style, and especially the music, but it proved fairly tedious to play now. I like everything about it besides, well, actually playing it. I played it for about 45 minutes and gathered everything I had wanted to see where the series originated. Now this is more like it. Plays noticeably better than the original, albeit still quite jank at times. Very wild, interesting locations that stuck in my mind even after I was done playing. I didn't go after the graffiti souls or the extra challenges, but I still felt satisfied after finishing it despite its fairly short length. I enjoyed the silly, non-serious vibe of it all and adored DJ Professor K. Jet Set Radio Future is a fun time, and I can see why this game is a cult classic today. I was super excited for this game since it was announced, despite not having played a Jet Set Radio game before. Team Reptile were the perfect team to handle a modern take on a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio, having previously created the Lethal League games. If anyone can make a worthy successor, it was definitely them. Bomber Cyberfunk is the best turn your brain off and move around game I've played in recent memory. It's very likely that at least 20 to 30% of my total playtime was just me skating around and racking up combos just for the hell of it. I can't remember the last time I had this much fun simply moving around in a game. Bomb Rush also captures the Jet Set Radio art style and world design perfectly. Where it starts to falter is mainly in the story missions. Crew battles, this game's quote-unquote boss battles, are very easy and very lame. There isn't much in the form of engaging and varied side content, honestly. This game is very good, but it isn't quite as good as it could be. Also, hot take, the music is extremely hit or miss. Sorry, not sorry. 7 years of development that paid off tremendously. I liked Freedom Planet 2 a lot more than the first game. Most of the levels are winners, and every character is fun in their own unique ways. Speaking of the levels, a close friend of mine helped with designing a few of them. I never thought I'd be able to say that about any game I play. It's so surreal. Almost everything is improved here compared to Freedom Planet 1. Level design, art and animation, seriously this game is fucking gorgeous. Probably one of the best looking games I've ever played. Controls, movement, and most of all, flow. The majority of levels have a great sense of flow throughout. It made me actively want to replay them to go for A and S ranks. The only thing I could argue the first game did better is the music. 2 has quite a few good tracks for sure, my favorite track being the one you're listening to right now. But for me, 1 has a stronger, catchier soundtrack overall. Freedom Planet 2 is a wonderful high-speed 2D platformer that deserves far more recognition and praise than it's received. It's really good. I started this playthrough in late 2021. This was the first Monotype playthrough I ever attempted. My next target was Volbeat, a 1% fucking encounter which took many sped up hours for some goddamn reason. The hunt for him was crazy. I picked him for one purpose: coverage. Moves like Water Pulse and Thunderbolt were very necessary coverage moves. One small problem: base 47 special attack wasn't gonna cut it. My solution? EV training. I stopped. 2 years later, I bit the bullet and hunkered down. We're so fucking back, I said. Going on to get Armaldo and motherfucking Heracross made this go from good to great. This is one of my favorite Pokemon playthroughs I've done to date. I loved my little buggies. I've slept on this game for 8 months under the assumption that it was a game of the month, undeserving of its moment of popularity. Would you believe me if I told you this is in my top 5 games I played this year? Pizza Tower is among the most surprising games I played this year. I like this game way more than I anticipated. What's funny about this sentiment though is, if you had asked me how I felt about this game after the first world, I would have had a lukewarm response. Pizza Tower is a slow burn. World 2 is when it really hits the ground running, and it doesn't stop. It's so satisfying to rack up combos and maintain top speed. And a large part of this is thanks to its buttery smooth controls and physics. There's tons of personality in every MS Paint pixel that I couldn't get enough of from start to finish. The soundtrack is also spectacular, the boss themes being particular highlights. Speaking of the bosses, they're all surprisingly great and a ton of fun. Many of the levels and bosses were fun enough for me to want to go back through a lot of them and P-rank them. That's how you know you made a damn good game. My only real low point is that Pizza Tower starts to lose steam with a few stinker levels in the few final worlds, the main culprits for me being Pepe Bot Factory and Pizza Scare. Other than that, this game is really freaking good. Sonic Superstars is the weirdest game I've ever played. I have so many thoughts on this game that I want to make a full review on this game someday, so I'll try my damnedest to summarize them. During my first playthrough, this game just felt off in nearly every aspect. Level design, level quality, pacing, bosses, good god the bosses, and worst of all, the music. Everything is so distractingly inconsistent and messy that it's jarring. The whole package just makes me ask so many questions, the main one being, what happened here? The worst part of it all is that it's so close to being good, which sucks. Each character controls and feels exactly how they should, with the exception of Knuckles. They butchered his glide, the poor bastard. The concept of the Emerald powers is great, but they end up being underutilized and underwhelming. I was even drawn to speedrunning Superstars because of all the boss skips discovered almost immediately after release, skipping by far the worst parts of the game. But not even that could convince me that this game's any better than just okay. 6 years after Mania? I was really hoping for better than just okay. Mario Wonder captures the Mario charm that no mainline 2D Mario has captured since World, or arguably New Super Mario Bros. DS. This game was a cozy, familiar ride that turned very chaotic with friends, but not in a frustrating way like New Soup Wii and U had the tendency to be. I loved what they did with the Wonder gimmicks. A lot of them surprised me with how many of them enhanced the levels rather than detracted. Many areas, Shining Falls in particular, look lovely, and so do the characters. Never before has the Mario crew been this expressive and joyful. This is a game I really like just looking at. My only gripes with the game are the odd lack of bosses in a few worlds, and the only real boss being Bowser Jr. reminded me of New Super Mario Bros. DS, and the overall pretty forgettable soundtrack. Wonder is a wonderful foundation for 2D Mario going forward, but it doesn't break any truly innovative ground. I'd heard occasional rumblings of people talking about this hack over the past few years. Some of my friends started playing it, so I decided to give it a shot. I went into this game with Nuzlocke catching rules, catching the first Pokemon I encounter in every new area, but without permadeath. I played the game on normal and minimal grinding. I wasn't interested in bullshit hard difficulty. Radical Red was decent for the first half, but goes completely off the rails post Silph Co. The game turns from a smooth and mild to insanely hardcore difficulty on a fucking dime. It's like a switch was flipped immediately after the Giovanni fight, and every fight has a bunch of competitive ready Pokemon, Megas, the works. I also found the game to be still far too grindy despite the advertised minimal grinding. I couldn't imagine playing hardcore. I lost interest in continuing completely. A bit of a different one. This cute little Halloween game was made by a close friend of mine, Ariety. She's the aforementioned friend from the Free and Planet 2 segment. This is a supplement to her much larger ongoing project, Prototype N. Diamond is a fun, short and sweet Mega Man-like with good level design, as to be expected, and funnily enough, made me excited for the full game. Please check this game out. It's $5 and it's half an hour long, but I promise you'll have fun for every minute of it. I put a link to its itch.io page in the description. If Pizza Tower was one of the most surprising games I played this year, Portal was the most surprising. I've always heard how great 2 is, but I'd never heard much about 1. I streamed my playthrough in VC with friends, and had a lot of super funny and crazy moments.
Like 45-minute run if you're like really good at it.
No, I know that.
Uh-oh.
No. Dude!
What? What?
He's a gamer! He ricocheted that off the wall.
Yeah, like that one. The progression of the puzzles is very smooth. I do wish you were given the second portal gun just a little bit earlier so I could have used it for a bit longer. GLaDOS is an absolute delight. Her writing is hilarious, and her company was very appreciated through this game's cold, liminal environments and soundtrack. I've never heard a soundtrack quite like Portal 1's. It's uneasy, yet comforting. A feeling which a game has never made me feel before. The last few puzzles were head scratchers, and I felt like a fucking genius when I solved them. Portal is a short, satisfying puzzler that I'm glad I finally gave a shot. Portal 2 has very quickly shot up in my ranking for my favorite games of all time. There's a reason this game is one of the most revered. Actually, there's quite a few reasons. The writing is among the best I've heard in any game, any piece of media for that matter. It consistently got laughs out of me. GLaDOS and Wheatley are gems. I was so afraid from the first impression you get of Wheatley that he'd be really cringy and I just wanted him to shut up. I'm so fucking happy this wasn't the case, you have no idea. The climax was awesome and surreal. The final act was triumphant and hysterical, and late game puzzles stumped me. All in the best ways possible. Even the multiplayer is amazing, on par with the single player. The only area I'd argue the first does better than the second is in its soundtrack. One of the composers of the first game, Kelly Bailey, left Valve after Portal 1 had released, meaning Portal 2's OST, done primarily by Mike Muraski, has a strikingly different score which I'm not as big of a fan of personally. That being said, however, it's still a very good soundtrack. I love how it dynamically changes based on what you're doing, most apparent when using the gels. I fucking love when games do that kind of thing. It floods my brain with serotonin, whoever that is. Portal 2 is an achievement of a sequel, possibly one of the best in gaming history. It's still Frontiers, but with an okay Amy and Tails and a dog shit Knuckles. First 3D appearance since 06, and you're still botched. I'm so sorry, my poor boy. Why do they keep doing this to you? A patch was released after writing this that allegedly makes Knuckles control better, reverting his glide to pre-release, though I still doubt that he controls well. Final Horizon is even more nothing, even more plopped assets on a default Unreal Engine map. All there is to do is run around and collect points for the skill trees. I did like flying around in the tornado mech from SA2, low poly and all, very silly. I'd heard about how much trouble the trial towers were giving people, but I had no trouble with them. What made me throw in the towel though was the Master Coco trial. I'm not grinding out a slow, boring, tedious boss rush of these slow, tedious bosses. I watched the final boss on YouTube and concluded that I didn't miss much. All in all, an absolute slog. Hotline Miami was somewhat fun, but clumsily executed. I'll be fully transparent, I made the grave mistake of playing this duology on the Switch. You wanna know what that means? Dogshit controls for a game that wasn't designed with a controller in mind. Wanna know another thing that I didn't know until it happened? Apparently, there's a console exclusive bug that can softlock you. An enemy can spawn outside the room you're in, and if you've already killed all the other enemies, you cannot progress and are forced to restart the entire level. The second time this happened to me, I was 20 minutes in and 3 rooms into a pretty difficult late game level. I had had enough. I watched the rest of the game on YouTube and gathered what I needed to story-wise, which wasn't much. Looking past my unfortunate personal experience, the game is decent at its core. The story only makes sense once you've played the sequel. These factors all led to me abandoning this game with a very sour taste in my mouth. I went into the sequel not all too optimistic, needless to say. I liked Hotline Miami 2 way more than I thought I would. I mean, yeah, the controls still feel like you're being forced to wrestle a bear with your hands tied and handcuffed behind your back, all while wearing a blindfold, but this game is absolutely better than the first. To start, the story is actually fucking phenomenal. One of the better, more thought-provoking stories I've experienced in a game. It is very disjointed, meaning it can be hard to follow the first time through. Might have to look up a chronological timeline video on YouTube. Me, I'm referring to me, I did that. It makes the first game's story actually make sense. I won't go into any specifics because it deserves to be experienced firsthand, but that is good preliminary information to know before going into the series. Along with the shitty controls, the AI is also just plain dog shit. This applies to the first game too, but I found it far more apparent and annoying here. It was extremely frustrating losing promising attempts because of random bullshit that was entirely out of my control, like a goon somehow being completely oblivious of my gunshot mere feet away from him, dumb fuck. Beyond the gameplay, the aesthetic has received an appreciated upgrade, even more so thanks to the absolutely amazing soundtrack. God damn. It quickly wriggled its way into my brain for weeks, and has only just recently left. Seriously, the soundtrack has become a new favorite for me. Almost every song is great. Go listen through them. Now, I'm not asking. Hotline Miami 2 is a good game and I liked it. Yippee! Mario RPG has always been an elusive, coveted game for me. If you were anywhere on the internet during the mid to late 2000s, you know. You could not escape Mario RPG. Songs, art, top SNES games, top games of all time, Geno for Brawl? This game has held a cult-like status and following for ages. So what do I think of it? After all the propaganda I absorbed during childhood? It's good. It's short, simple, and fun. Nothing in this game will blow your mind. It plays everything very safe. I feel like more could have been done here, but as an introduction to the genre, I think it's pretty easy to digest. The newly arranged OST is delightful, upbeat, and best of all, catchy. This is also one of the most faithful yet best looking remakes I've played in recent memory. BDSP. This comes at the cost of the game chugging at many more points than it should. Sometimes it even happens in battle, which makes timing hits, you know, the central battle mechanic, finicky at times, which can be pretty annoying. I also appreciate that they added some post-game content, but since it's just boss rematches, I can't say it was enticing enough for me to tackle after beating the game. Mario RPG retains nearly all the personality and charm the SNES original had. Considering the wildly varying quality of most remakes these days, that's quite a relief. This was a game I hadn't considered playing until recently, thanks in part to the game's 25th anniversary. I had never played a game like it before, and I was eager to step a bit outside of my comfort zone for this one. Half-Life still holds up fairly well even 25 years after release. It was a technical marvel and very influential in its prime, and its design is still tight even today. The gunplay is super fun. The crossbow, Tau cannon, and gluon gun were the standouts for me. The last third is when Half-Life really starts to lose steam for me. Surface tension, Lambda Core, and the entirety of Zen are the levels that immediately come to mind. Coming on this game as someone who's almost never played an FPS in his life, Half-Life rightfully earned its classic status. I was actually considering skipping over the Half-Life 1 expansions altogether, but I ended up playing them out of morbid curiosity and the fact that I enjoyed Half-Life 1 more than I thought I would. I'm covering them both in this segment because they were both made by Gearbox and are similar enough. Opposing Force was kind of cool. A lot of the new weapons introduced here are pretty sick. Deagle, Sniper Rifle, and Shock Roach were my favorites. Notice how there was one tool that I didn't mention. The biggest disappointment of this entire expansion in my eyes is the Barnacle Grapple. Putting a grappling hook in any game almost always makes it better. Almost. Gearbox fumbled this hard. It's really finicky and underutilized. Cool transition, yeah, this game's pretty fucking boring, dude. I know some people prefer this over the main game, but I just do not agree. It didn't help that I encountered a handful of nasty softlocks that forced me to restart entire segments of levels. Opposing Force is alright, but it could have been a lot better. As for Blue Shift, it sure is 2 more hours of Half-Life 1, but without the cool new weapons that Opposing Force introduced 2 years prior. Blue Shift exists. I first heard about this hack when it came out a few years ago, and it immediately left my brain. I didn't rediscover it until just recently, and I'm very glad I did. Fool's Gold is such a neat twist. It changes every Pokemon's typing, design, moveset, stats. everything. But there's so much more to this hack than that. It goes above the Call of Duty when it comes to a ROM hack. They added every Gen 3 Pokemon and every cross-gen evolution from Gens 4, 8, and 9. It even adds a handful of regional forms for both Kanto and the newly added and revised Sevi. It updates GSC while mostly maintaining the authentic Gen 2 feel. Moves from future gens, new moves, the physical special split, new areas, new music? This is one of the most ambitious fan games I've ever played, and it was made by a small group of friends. That's fucking awesome. Obtaining all the Kanto badges was my stopping point. I didn't even touch the Elite Four rematches or the Sevi Islands. There's so much more I could return to if I wanted. In hindsight, I kinda wish I'd gone into this game blind so that I didn't know the types and designs of all the Pokemon beforehand. On the other hand though, the team I ended up using quickly became a new favorite of mine. So much so that it even made me pick up my goddamn drawing pen. If your game makes me come out of art retirement, you made something truly special. This hack wholeheartedly deserves more attention. My only prior experience with the Mario & Luigi series was playing Bowser's Inside Story as a kid, and getting stuck on that goddamn motherfucking bullshitting trauma-inducing carrot tapping mini-game, holy shit. Anyways, Superstar Saga. I enjoyed this one a good bit more than RPG. This game took the risks that I wish RPG took with its timing-based battle system. The 3 levels of Bros attacks are so smart. More BP for easier inputs, and vice versa. It rewards improvement at executing these attacks in such a simple yet sophisticated way. Superstar Saga also has unexpectedly sharp writing. It actually made me chuckle huck, woohoo, and tee-hee even. Fawful, Cackletta, and Fawful are wonderful. That's actually what I had written in my script and thought it was too accurate to fix. The only part of this game I'm lukewarm about is the Beanstar shard collecting being set up as this climactic important thing, only for it to be done before you know it. It's very evident that the team at Alpha Dream are passionate fans of the Mario series and the right group to make this game and the series going forward. I'll overcome my childhood trauma and try Bowser's Inside Story again eventually. I first played this game during the summer of last year, while under the assumption that I would never find a roguelite that I enjoyed. 20 plus hours later, and I can safely say, yeah, okay, I couldn't have been more happy to have been proven wrong. Hades was one of the best games I played in 2022, and quickly became one of my favorite games of all time. I was so mad at myself for sleeping on it for so long. However, I didn't give it the send-off it deserved. I never rolled credits. I beat Hades just 8 times, not knowing that upon the 10th completion, I would beat Hades. A few of my friends got back into Hades over the last month or so. Watching them play it again, along with the game finally going on a very good sale on Xbox, because I originally played it through Game Pass, gave me the motivation I needed to dive back into that save and finish what I started. 2 runs. 2 insanely cracked runs in a single hour was all I needed this whole time. I brought Persephone back to the House of Hades. I beat Hades. I beat one of my favorite games that I'd unknowingly left unfinished. It felt like a metaphorical weight being lifted off my shoulders. What an appropriate send-off to the year. I managed to squeeze one more game into the last few days of this year that had caught my eyes a few months earlier. That game is... Any 3D platformer that includes a side flip is automatically great. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Pseudo-Regalia is a short and sweet 3D Metroidvania with fluid movement that becomes more fun the more upgrades you get. By the time I obtained all of them, I was flying through rooms that I previously struggled to navigate. It's almost like it's a well-designed Metroidvania or something. I've seen a rise of PS1 and 64 influenced indies in recent years, and Pseudo-Regalia captures that era's dreamlike, sometimes liminal aesthetic marvelously. The soundtrack also surprised me with how good it is. Each track suits the respective areas very nicely, my favorite being the one playing right now. There isn't much in the way of story or characters to speak of, though I thought the little goat guys were funny. Minerals. Pseudo-Regalia is a great example of the phrase, less is more. The only real gripe I have, God, this game could have used a map. It's not too big of a map, but there are plenty of times where I got very lost, and not in a fun way. By the time I beat the game, I had the map mostly memorized, but it also would have been beneficial for having any idea of my completion progress for each area. Not knowing if I'd fully cleaned out an area without having to comb back through every square inch of these sometimes very spacious rooms was not very fun. An additional mini gripe, I wish there were a few more bosses than just the final one. But fuck all that nonsense, you get to stare at big anthro goat ass for 7 hours. A+. I also managed to squeeze in Sonic Adventure a day after because I was in the mood to replay it. I don't have much to say about it besides...
Ow, this thing is really huge!
Whoa!
I like it less than I did as a kid. It's the Sonic game of all time. 2.5 Raising Cane's box combo chicken fingers out of 4 Raising Cane's box combo chicken fingers. Look, I'm hungry, okay? Thank you so much for watching to the end. This project was a considerable undertaking that I only decided on making into a video at the last possible minute, meaning that I hadn't recorded any footage beforehand. Previously, this was just in the form of spreadsheets that I had going all year, updating as I went along. This is also the first kind of project like this that I've ever put together, so I'm very open to any and all feedback. I've also started streaming more regularly. The link to my Twitch is in the description. I just recently finished up a Pokemon Scarlet Dark monotype playthrough, and I plan on streaming a wider variety of games in the future. This video's already gone on plenty long enough, so I'll see ya when I see ya. Take care, and have a good one.